Hello everyone, my name is Heather and welcome to the channel Bookables. Today I am going to be doing a recap on a video I did at the very beginning of the year. So at the beginning of 2022 I made a whole list of 22 books I want to read in 2022, and it was really a big emphasis on backlist books because I noticed I noticed myself as a reader that I read primarily new releases, which I didn't love. I was focusing too much on that, and I was really letting a lot of books that were published previously just kind of slide by because I was so focused on the next book, making sure I was reviewing the latest book and things like that, and I wanted to kind of change that. So I made this list. I did a little checkway mid-year through, and now I'm going to tell you about the whole progression of how I did. So there has been some changes in this list. Did I read them all? No. Did I switch them out? Absolutely. So I'm going to share with you all and try to be concise as possible. So as you can see with the original graphic right here, a lot of these I did not read. So I'm going to tell you which ones I switched out. Early in the year, I learned that sci-fi was not going to be on this list because at the beginning of the year, I had this grand notion of like, I want to read more sci-fi. I enjoy sci-fi. It's so fun. I read like 3 sci-fi books and I was like, sci-fi is not for me. It's not, and I have to come to terms with it. I think I like the idea of sci-fi. I think it's amazing, but I just don't ever quite understand it. And that's just me. Like, I'm not a very overly scientific person. Like, I am horrible. When I say horrible, I mean horrible at math and science. Those were my worst subjects in school, my worst subjects still today. Loathe them both. I just do not do well with that. So I think with that, reading sci-fi doesn't really help me much. There's a few exceptions, obviously, and I'm not going to quit on the genre altogether, but I put like 7 or 8 sci-fi books on this list, and quickly throughout in the beginning of the year, I was like, this is just not feasible for me. So a lot of them got replaced, such as The Space Between Worlds. I replaced that one with Jar of Hearts by Jennifer Hillier, and anything I replaced is backlist, if that makes sense. Which I actually really enjoyed Jar of Hearts. Discovery of Witches, that was kind of a book I put on there on a whim. I was like, maybe I'll read this, maybe I won't. I'll be honest with you, I didn't attempt to. It's just too big and I think it daunts me, so I just even read it. I switched that one with The Nothing Man. It's a Thursday Murder Club. It's one that I did attempt to read, but I could not get into it. I just really couldn't. I do not think it's a series for me. It's a cozy mystery, but it was just a very hard writing for me to get into. So I switched that one with My Best Friend's Exorcism. And then Night Film. I attempted this one as well, but again, it was the sheer length. I was like, I'm not going to finish this in time. I don't have time to read really lengthy books these day and age. I just don't. So I switched that out with No Exit, which coincidentally enough, I also DNF'd that one. So that's kind of an empty one. And then Binti is a sci-fi one that I was like, I'm just not into sci-fi. I could have read it probably. I should have because it's a novella, so I should have read it. Maybe I will in the future, but I switched that one out with The Simplicity of Cider. Then Hench is one that I was going to read, and then I just kept hearing not the best reviews on it, so I was like, I don't know, so I just eventually switched it out. I switched that out with Sometimes I Lie, and then the last one is another sci-fi one, Long Way to a Small and Angry Planet. I switched out to The Kind Worth Killing. So I switched, how many of those? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So I switched 7 out. So I read the majority of the list, which I feel happy about, so I'm happy about that. But like I said, I DNF'd the one I switched with, one, No Exit. For some reason, I couldn't get into it. Everybody loves No Exit. I just couldn't get into it. I don't know why. And then the one I did not get to, sadly, this year, unfortunately, is Velvet is the Night by Silvia Moreno Garcia. It's still on my list. I just didn't get to it this year. The whole thing with this is that I was doing really good with this whole list. Like the beginning of the year, I was like, I'm knocking this out. I'm doing great. And then I hit a big old slump come September, and so I didn't finish it strong, I think. But anyway, let's talk about the results. So in this, I'm going to talk about all the books I read and more specifically the ratings I gave them. So I'm going to start with 2 stars. On this list, I had 3 2 stars, which is not bad in a whole group of like 20 books because there's 2 I didn't finish it. The Last Thing He Told Me by Laura Dave, I did not like that book. I read it mainly because it won the Goodreads Choice Awards a couple years ago for the best thriller. Why? I don't know. It's got a poor case of mismanaged, mismarketed. It's marketed as a mystery thriller, but it really shouldn't be. It's more marketed. It should be a women's fiction, so I don't think that's any fault of the book at all. It wasn't a horribly written book by any means, but I think I was going into it expecting a mystery thriller, but it wasn't that. So that's why I didn't like it. And I think a lot of people have that same kind of gripe with it as well. Then we have The Midnight Library by Matt Haig. This is another kind of, I think a lot of these I got from like Goodreads Choice Awards, which is a difficult thing anyway. Some people love it, some people don't. I'm kind of in the middle of it. But it was hyped up. Everyone loves The Midnight Library. It's all about a character who's maybe deciding to end her life, and then she gets shown the different life she could have had with different choices that she made. And it's all about realizing your choices and your meaning. And it had this really great lesson behind it all, but it just was not good. I did not enjoy it in the slightest. I just didn't. And the last one, The Simplicity of Cider, I read this mainly because it was like a fall book set on an apple orchard, and it was kind of boring, honestly. Didn't love it. So those are only 2 stars, that's when I rate a book 2 stars, it means I did not like it. So only 3 to have in a list of 20, not that bad. The majority of my books were 3 stars. So I have Sometimes I Lie by Alice Feeney, a mystery thriller that I did enjoy. I do like Alice Feeney. This is one of my least favorites by her, but I still thought it was a very fun, mysterious book. All Systems Red, this is a sci-fi book that I did manage to read. This was a fun one, but again, it went over my head. I'm not a very sci-fi person, so I think I could have enjoyed it more. It sounds so stupid. If I was smarter. It sounds so stupid, I say, if I was smarter, but you get what I'm saying. I feel like it just goes over my head. And Hairpin Bridge, I did read one by Taylor Adams, so Hairpin Bridge is one I read. It was okay. It wasn't amazing. I learned with Taylor Adams that he writes primarily mystery thriller books that take place in one day, and those don't jive well with me. I just don't like it. I don't know why, I don't, but this one was okay. Kind Worth Killing by Peter Swanson. I read this because if a lot of people's favorite mystery thrillers, this is on it. And I was like, I'm gonna love it. And I found it to be okay. I found it very predictable. I didn't love it as much as I expected to love it, but it was okay. It wasn't a least favorite by any means for me. Hail Mary. This one hurts to put on 3 stars because Andy Weir has written one of my favorite books of all time, The Martian, which is a sci-fi book. But I think what makes The Martian so amazing is the character of Mark Watney and how sarcastic and witty he is. And in this book, it's very different characters. This book is strictly I could have enjoyed it more straight up, honestly, with you if I was smarter. There's no sugarcoating about that. If I knew more sci-fi stuff, I'm sure I would love it, but I don't. I like the overall theme of it, the overall setting, but a lot of it, space jargon, science jargon, over my head completely. Where the Crawdads Sing. I read this because, again, the hype. It was made into a movie. Reese Witherspoon's obsessed with it. Everyone's obsessed with it. I thought it was okay. Was it amazing? No, and I'll stand by that. It was just kind of okay. I'm glad I finally read it, though, so I can finally have a definitive answer on it. And the last book in my 3 stars is The Princess Trap by Talia Hibbert. She's one of my favorite romance authors. This was an okay romance. It's not one of my favorites by her. I don't feel like it's very strong, but it was cute. I love I really enjoy all of her books, so I'm not surprised that it's on a 3 star. It was just kind of a middle of the road for me. We have 4 stars. I have 6 reads that are 4 stars, which is pretty good. 4 stars for me is it was so close to 5, but it just wasn't fully there. This one, I have a sci-fi book, and that is Skyward by Brandon Sanderson. It's a YA book. I thought this was fun. It did go over my head at some points, but I really enjoyed the overall plot of it. The characters were really fun, and I do plan to continue with this series. When? I don't know, but it was a fun sci-fi one that I did enjoy. Dial A for Aunties, I put this one on here because it was hyped up, and with good reason. It was a fun, cozy mystery thriller that will make you laugh out loud, and it's just a good time. If you want a good time in a book, check this one out. I was very happy with it. I loved it a ton. And then we have The Nothing Man. I saw this one and I thought it was such an intriguing plot. This one is about a character that he's a janitor or something, and he finds a book where he's working at about a serial killer called The Nothing Man, and he is actually the Nothing Man. So a serial killer is reading a book about himself. So it's an amazing plot, and I would have loved it if it was executed a little bit more, if it was executed better a little bit more, but it was really good. I really enjoyed the whole plot within a plot book, you're reading the actual book that he's reading. It's a very interesting book, and I liked it for that. So I would recommend it. We have Death of the Nile by Agatha Christie. This is my 2nd Agatha Christie book, and my favorite. I really loved it. It's part of the, I can't ever remember, her Poirot series. He's a famous detective. It's fun. It takes place all on this cruise ship, if you will. They're going down the Nile. Somebody dies. It's like a whodunit. It's a great one. If you love Agatha Christie, I'm sure you've heard of this. I've yet to watch the adaptation because I'm just horrible at that nowadays, but I really like the book. The last 4-star I have is The Sweetest Remedy by Jane Ungaro. This was, again, super sweet, about family, about, it's all about a character that realizes that she has siblings in Nigeria, and so she meets them and she learns more about them because her father has passed away, and it's just a beautiful romance with a really big emphasis on family. For 5 stars, the cream of the crop in this list, I have 5 books that I read, which is really, really good. All of these books will for sure be on my favorites book of the year. Like, I loved them all. First up is House in the Cerulean Sea by T.J. Klune. It is no secret this book is overhyped on BookTube. Like, it is massively overhyped. With good reason. This book is a warm hug. You will fall in love with these characters. You will fall in love with the writing. Like, it is just astonishing. Whenever somebody is asking for a good pick-me-up book, I will always and forever recommend this book. So is it overhyped? Yes. Is it worth every single bit of that hype? Yes. In My Dreams, I Hold a Knife. I picked this one up again because it was hyped, and again, it lived up to the hype. This one was about unlikable characters. Like, all the characters are straight up horrible. They're in college, somebody gets murdered, they go back to their college reunion to finally figure it out, and you hate all of them. Like, you really do. And I don't do well with books like that because I have to have some sort of likeness to get me connected to a character, but for some reason this book worked, and the writing style really attests to it, and the ending was just twist, and I loved it. Easily my favorite thriller I've read all year for sure. Might even be my favorite thriller of all time. Loved it that much. Another thriller that I loved is Jar of Hearts by Jennifer Hillier. I read 3 books of hers after this because I just loved this one so much. It's like a dark, twisted thriller book, and I love the mess out of it. This could be a great movie. I would love to see this made into a movie, honestly, because it was just that twisty kind of dark book that I liked, and easily my favorite book by her. Then we have Orquídea Divina. I read this book on a whim. This is one that I was like, maybe I'll read it on this list, maybe not, and I am so glad I read it. This book is just beautiful. The way it's written is beautiful. It's magical realism. It is mainly about family and the loss of family, but also kind of coming together as a family with some magical bits thrown in there. I love this one a ton. Like, it's easily in my top 5 for this year. Just the way it was written, the way it was so beautiful and lyrical, like, I loved it. And my last favorite that I read this year that was a 5-star is My Best Friend's Exorcism by Grady Hendrix. I have read Grady Hendrix books in the past before, but somehow I just forgot about My Best Friend's Exorcism, and I was like, this is a perfect book to read in the fall, and I'm so glad I did because it's my favorite of his by far. Like, if you don't know, Grady Hendrix writes horror novels, but he writes them with humor and also with a lot of, like, not gore, but kind of gross stuff. Like, there's a scene in this book that was like, oh, it was bad, but it was just interesting. This book takes place in the 80s, which adds to its charm 1000%. And at the heart of it is about friendship and about a friend getting possessed by a demon. You know, regular stuff. But goodness me, did Grady Hendrix handle it amazingly. Our final thoughts on this list. I am very glad I did it. At the beginning, I was very excited about it, and then it got midway, and I was like, I don't know. And then at the end of the year, I was like, I don't know. And then when I was researching of all the books I read, I'm like, I really enjoyed the majority of them. And I'm so glad I did this because it pushed me out of my comfort zone. You know, 5 books on this list that I love that are 5 stars are going to be on my favorites list that maybe I would have not read just because I had my head so far up in the clouds as far as like new releases. So I am so happy that I read this and that I challenged myself. And you know, I didn't technically finish the 22 books. Do I count myself in that as a failure? Not at all. I think I did great. For me to read 20 of them is really good. Like, with, if you guys don't know, I have 2 young kids. It's hard. I have barely any time to like think, just to breathe for a day. So to read is even harder. So I am so happy I did this, and I would love to do this again, not anytime soon because that was a long challenge to do. Maybe in a couple years I can revisit it, but I liked challenging myself, you know, also finding out that some genres just aren't for me. Like, I had the idea of loving sci-fi, and without doing this year, I would not have learned that sci-fi is not my jam. So like, I'm trying to do that next year. Like, next year I'm trying to really maybe feel like maybe nonfiction is my jam. Maybe it isn't. But either way, I'm going to read more and just kind of determine that. that. Does that make any sense? Trying to find exactly what genres I love and what genres are just kind of not for me, and it's a good way to figure that out with lists like this. So I'm very happy I did it. I love doing it, and yeah, I am saying it's a success. It is to me. I read a lot of my favorites that I love, like some of my favorite books of all time are on this list. So I feel very accomplished in that regard. So I hope you enjoyed getting a little peek into how I created the list, how I feel about this list, and things like that. As always, thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in my next video. Bye.